The house was unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that wraps around you like a thick fog. I sat on the edge of our bed, my heart racing with each tick of the clock. Julian was coming, and the thought sent a shiver down my spine. What was I doing? I stole a glance at the door that separated me from the sleeping figure of Mark in the next room. He looked peaceful, his slow breaths a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Part of me felt safe in my marriage to Mark. We had built a life together, filled with laughter and shared dreams. But that comfort was now tinged with a thrill that I had never known before. The unpredictable excitement of my affair with Julian was intoxicating. Did I really want to give that up? I closed my eyes, trying to push away memories of Mark, but they flooded back. Our first date, the way he made me laugh until I cried, those quiet moments where everything seemed perfect. Those memories felt dim now, overshadowed by my growing desire for Julian. I bit my lip, fighting the conflicting feelings that churned within me. How could I love two people so differently? The sound of a knock at the door made my heart leap. It was soft, but loud enough to pull me from my thoughts. I jumped to my feet, my pulse quickening even more. Was I ready for this? What would happen when I opened that door? "Hey, it's me," Julian's voice floated through the crack. Just hearing him sent a rush of excitement through my body. I took a deep breath and opened the door, my heart pounding like a drum. He stood there, leaning casually against the doorframe, a smile playing on his lips. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Thanks," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. The moment our eyes met, I felt a spark that ignited every nerve in my body. "Are you ready for a little adventure?" he asked, stepping into the room, closing the door behind him. I hesitated, my mind racing with thoughts of Mark, but the thrill in Julian's eyes pulled me in like a moth to a flame. I nodded slowly, my heart betraying me. "I guess I am." The air between us crackled with tension as he moved closer. I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. How could I want him so badly when I had a life with Mark? I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away from it all, but instead, I stood there, frozen. As Julian reached for me, I was swept up in a whirlwind of emotions. His touch was electric, igniting something deep within me that I thought had long been extinguished. I wanted to lean into him, to forget the life I had built with Mark, even if only for a moment. But guilt twisted in my stomach. What about Mark? He deserved my loyalty, didn't he? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the conflicting thoughts. "Julian, I can't," I stammered, pulling away slightly. "What's holding you back?" he asked, his voice low and inviting. "You know what we have is real, Avery." I shook my head, struggling to find the words. "It's just Mark. I can't hurt him." Julian stepped closer again, his eyes searching mine. "What about your happiness? Are you really happy with him?" His question hung in the air like a heavy fog. I wanted to scream out that I was, but deep down, I knew the truth. I was torn between the safety of my life with Mark and the thrilling uncertainty that Julian offered. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words and desires. I felt as if I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into the unknown. I had to make a choice, but my heart was divided. As Julian's fingers brushed against my skin, I was left wondering, could I truly embrace the chaos of my feelings, or was I meant to cling to the safety of what I had? The question echoed in my mind, leaving me breathless as I stood there, caught between two worlds. As I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, I couldn't help but drift back to the early days of my relationship with Mark. Those moments felt like a distant memory now, but they used to fill my heart with laughter and dreams. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me like a warm blanket. Do you remember our first trip together? I asked Mark one evening, as we flipped through an old photo album. He chuckled, his eyes sparkling with that same joy I fell in love with. How could I ever forget? You got us lost in the middle of nowhere. I laughed, recalling how I had insisted on taking a shortcut. But we found that little diner, and the pie was worth it, wasn't it? Absolutely, he said, wrapping his arm around me. That was the best pie I've ever had. Those were the days when every moment felt electric. We had dreams of traveling the world, of building a life filled with adventure. But as time passed, the laughter began to fade, replaced by the dull rhythm of our daily routines. I could feel an emotional distance growing between us, like a thin veil separating our hearts. I often caught myself staring at Mark while he read on the couch, his brow furrowed in concentration. A sense of longing washed over me, but it wasn't for him. It was for something more, something I couldn't quite grasp. I wondered when it had all changed. When did our love become just a habit? Then came Julian. The first time we met felt like a scene from a movie. I remember walking into that small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. I noticed him immediately, sitting in the corner, sketching in a notebook. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and there was something magnetic about the way he focused on his art. "Hi there," I said, my heart pounding as I approached him. "What are you drawing?" He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes, but then a smile broke across his face. "Just a little something. Do you want to see?" As he turned the notebook toward me, our fingers brushed against each other. A spark ignited between us, sending a thrill down my spine. "Wow, you're really talented," I said, trying to mask the heat creeping into my cheeks. "Thanks," he replied, his gaze locked onto mine. "I could say the same about you. You have a certain energy." That energy, that chemistry, was undeniable. We talked for hours, lost in each other's words, and with every laugh, I felt an insatiable hunger growing inside me. I craved more than just a conversation. I craved the exhilaration he brought into my life. It was a stark contrast to the comfortable silence I shared with Mark. But with each thrilling moment I spent with Julian, a bittersweet realization tugged at my heart. I was torn, caught between the safe haven of my marriage and the intoxicating thrill of my affair. I could feel my heart dividing, and it felt heavy. "Why do you look so serious?" Julian asked one evening, his voice laced with concern as we sat on a park bench under the stars. I sighed, my fingers tracing patterns in the grass. "I don't know. It's just... everything feels so complicated." "Complicated how?" he pressed, leaning closer. "I love Mark. I really do. But there's something about you. Something that makes me feel alive," I confessed, my heart racing. He studied me for a moment, his expression softening. "Avery, you don't have to choose right now. Just be honest with yourself." I nodded, but the truth was heavy on my chest. I didn't want to hurt Mark, but the thrill of being with Julian was intoxicating. My heart was a battleground, and I was losing myself in the fight. Each encounter with Julian only deepened my desire while pushing me further from the safe life I had built with Mark. As I lay awake that night, I realized that the laughter and dreams I once shared with Mark were still there, buried beneath layers of routine and unspoken words. Yet, the thrill that Julian offered was like a breath of fresh air, awakening something deep within me. My heart was divided, and the struggle between love and desire felt like a never-ending storm. The night wrapped around us like a thick fog, intensifying every whisper and touch shared between Julian and me. As he leaned in closer, the heat of his breath brushed against my skin, sending shivers down my spine. My heart raced, not just from the thrill of being with him, but from the weight of guilt pressing down on me. I had Mark, my husband, asleep just a few feet away, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in our home. "Are you okay?" Julian's voice broke through my chaotic thoughts. His eyes searched mine, and in that moment, I felt both seen and lost. I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the conflict within me, a battle between desire and loyalty. "This is wrong, Julian. I shouldn't be here." He brushed a thumb across my cheek, his touch igniting a fire that made me forget my guilt, if only for a moment. "But it feels so right, doesn't it? Being here with me?" With every caress, I felt my resolve weakening. How could something that felt so good also feel so terrible? I thought of Mark, his deep, even breaths echoing in the silence of the night, and I felt my heart twist. "What about Mark?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What am I doing to him?" Julian's expression shifted, seriousness replacing the playful glint in his eyes. "Avery, you need to think about what you want. We can't keep pretending this doesn't matter. You deserve to be happy." His words struck a chord within me, awakening a desire I had buried deep. But as I stared into his eyes, the reality of my life hit me like a cold wave. "I thought I was happy with Mark," I said, the honesty of my statement surprising me. "We had our dreams, our plans. I never wanted to hurt him." "Plans can change," Julian said softly. "You have to ask yourself if those dreams still make you smile. Are you still the same person you were when you chose him?" I looked away, my thoughts drifting to the early days with Mark. The laughter, the late-night talks, the way he'd hold me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. "I remember when everything felt so bright," I murmured. "Now it's just routine." "Then it's time to break free from that routine," Julian urged, reaching for my hand and intertwining our fingers. "Life is too short to live in a cage made of comfort." "Is that what this is?" I asked, my voice tinged with uncertainty. "A cage made of comfort?" "Maybe," he replied, squeezing my hand. "But it's also a chance to explore who you really are, to find out what makes you feel alive." I felt the truth of his words seep into my bones, yet a part of me still clung to the stability Mark offered. "I just don't know," I whispered, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "I don't want to hurt him, but I can't ignore what I feel for you." The silence that followed was heavy. Each second felt like a lifetime, and as my heart battled with my mind, I realized I stood at a crossroads. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Julian leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. "We face it together, but you need to decide what you truly want. I can't make that choice for you." In that moment, the weight of my choices pressed down on me like a thick fog. I thought of Mark, of the life we built, and of the undeniable connection I had with Julian. I had to confront the reality of my situation. "I need time to think," I finally said, pulling away slightly. "This is all so much." He nodded, understanding written across his face. "Take all the time you need, Avery. Just know that whatever you decide, I'm here." As the night deepened around us, I felt a flicker of clarity amid the chaos. I had to confront not just Julian, but also the choices I had made. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth. My heart was divided, but in that moment, I felt a step closer to understanding what I truly wanted. As dawn broke, light spilled into the room, casting a warm glow over the tangled sheets. I lay there, my heart pounding, caught between the two lives I had been living. Julian's presence still lingered in the air, filling the space with an intensity that made my pulse race. Panic gripped me as the reality of my choices settled like a heavy weight on my chest. I glanced over at Mark, still fast asleep in the next room, blissfully unaware of the turmoil raging inside me. How could I face him after everything? The thought made my stomach twist. I loved him, or at least I had loved him once, but now my heart fluttered at the memory of Julian's touch, the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. Just then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, slicing through the quiet. It was a message from Julian. "Can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. I knew we had to confront what happened, but part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend like it didn't happen. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that we needed to face our reality. I threw the covers off and sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. What should I do? Should I respond? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that avoiding this conversation wouldn't make it go away. I typed back, "Yes, when?" I didn't have to wait long for his reply. "How about now? I'll come over." My heart raced again, but this time it was out of fear. I looked at the door that led to Mark, who was still asleep, and I felt a pang of guilt. Could I really have a conversation with Julian while knowing that Mark was just a few feet away? When Julian arrived, his expression was serious, filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Avery," he said softly, stepping into the room, I think we need to talk about what happened last night." I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. "Yeah, we do." I motioned for him to sit down on the couch. We sat across from each other, the air thick with unspoken words. "I can't stop thinking about it," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "You mean so much to me, but I know this isn't just about us, is it?" "No," I replied, feeling tears prick my eyes. "There's Mark. There's my life. I don't want to hurt him, but—" I paused, the weight of my emotions crashing over me. "But I can't ignore what I feel for you." Julian leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. "Avery, you have to decide what you really want. Do you want this life with Mark, or do you want to explore what we have?" His words struck a chord deep within me. I thought of my life with Mark, the comfort and stability we had built together. "I don't know if I can just throw that away," I said, my voice trembling. "But I also can't pretend I don't feel this connection with you." Julian sighed, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "I don't want to pressure you, but I can't keep living in this limbo. It's not fair to either of us." I swallowed hard, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. "What if the thrill of passion isn't worth the cost of stability?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. "Avery, you deserve to be happy," he replied earnestly. "But happiness doesn't mean you have to choose between us. It means you have to choose what makes your heart feel whole." I looked down, my heart heavy with the weight of his words. I had been so focused on the thrill of being with Julian that I hadn't truly thought about what it meant for my life and the life I had built with Mark. "Can you give me time?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Julian said gently, his eyes softening. "But promise me you'll think about it, about what you really want." As he stood to leave, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I was left with my thoughts, the choice hanging over me like a dark cloud. I watched him walk away, knowing that the coming days would bring clarity, but also more questions about what my heart truly desired. The morning light crept into the room, casting soft shadows that danced across the walls. I lay in bed, my heart still racing from the whirlwind of emotions that had taken over my night. Mark lay next to me, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I turned to watch him, his face peaceful in sleep, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. How could I betray this man who had shared so much of his life with me? As I got out of bed, I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the weight of the night's events. I needed to put on a brave face, to act like everything was normal. I walked quietly to the kitchen, hoping that a cup of coffee would help clear my mind. "Morning, Avery," Mark said, his voice thick with sleep as he entered the kitchen. "You're up early." "Yeah, I couldn't sleep," I replied, pouring the coffee into a mug. I tried to smile, but I could feel the tension in my chest. Just wanted to get a head start on the day. Mark smiled, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. "Good idea. I'll help you with breakfast." As we moved around the kitchen together, the familiarity of our routine felt comforting, yet suffocating. I flipped pancakes while Mark sliced fresh fruit, and for a moment, I tried to focus on the task at hand, but the memory of Julian's touch lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of the choices I had made. "Everything okay?" Mark asked, looking at me with concern. "You seem a bit distracted." I forced a laugh, trying to dismiss his worry. "Just tired, I guess. Lots on my mind." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. I hated lying to him, but the truth felt too heavy to share. How could I explain the thrill of my affair with Julian? The way he made me feel alive? I couldn't. Not yet. After breakfast, I retreated to my bedroom, desperate for some clarity. I grabbed my journal from the nightstand and began to write. The words flowed out of me like a river, each sentence a release of the emotions I had bottled up inside. "What am I doing?" I wrote. "Why do I feel this way?" I poured my heart onto the pages, reflecting on my feelings for both Mark and Julian. The safety of my marriage felt like a warm blanket, but the excitement of my affair was like a spark, igniting something deep within me. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from an old friend, Sarah. "Hey, it's been a while. Want to grab coffee later?" I hesitated for a moment. Sarah had always been a good listener. Maybe talking to her would help me sort through my thoughts. "Sure," I replied, my fingers trembling as I typed. "What time?" After we made plans, I felt a flicker of hope. Spending time with Sarah might give me the perspective I needed. I closed my journal and took a deep breath, determined to approach the day with an open heart. When I met Sarah at the cafe, her warm smile instantly put me at ease. "Avery, it's so good to see you," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Good to see you too," I replied, feeling a sense of comfort in her presence. As we settled into our seats with steaming cups of coffee, Sarah looked at me closely. "You seem different. What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "It's just life, you know? I've been feeling a bit lost lately." "Talk to me," she encouraged, her eyes full of understanding. I took a deep breath and started to open up, sharing my struggles with Mark and the confusion Julian had brought into my life. "I feel torn between what I have and what I want," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'm being fair to anyone." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "It's okay to feel that way. Sometimes we have to choose what makes us truly happy, even if it's hard. What does happiness look like for you?" Her question hung in the air, and I realized I had never really thought about it. Was happiness about stability with Mark, or was it found in the thrill of my connection with Julian? "I guess I'm still trying to figure that out," I said, feeling a weight lift as I spoke my truth. "But I know I need to make a choice soon." As we continued to talk, I felt a sense of freedom. I was finally starting to confront the chaos in my heart, exploring the difference between freedom and commitment. Would I choose the safe path or dare to follow my desires? I didn't have the answers yet, but I was beginning to understand that the journey to find them was just as important as the destination. As I sat on the edge of our bed, the morning light seeped through the curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady reminder of the turmoil brewing within me. Today was the day. I could feel it in my bones. It was time to confront Mark about us. I glanced at him, still sleeping soundly, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. He looked peaceful, his chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. Memories of our laughter and dreams flooded my mind, but they felt distant now, like echoes of a song I once loved. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "Mark," I whispered, my voice barely rising above the soft sounds of the morning. He stirred but didn't wake. I needed to wake him. I needed to talk. "Mark," I said a little louder, my voice trembling, "we need to talk." He blinked awake, confusion clouding his eyes. "What's wrong, Avery?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. The concern in his tone made my heart ache. "It's about us," I replied, my stomach tightening. "I've been feeling lost." "Lost?" he echoed, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. The words caught in my throat. "I mean, things have changed. I've changed." He frowned, and I could see the worry etched on his face. "Avery, what's going on? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "I've been seeing someone else." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and I felt the room grow colder. Mark's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "What? Who?" "Julian," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "How long has this been going on?" "Just a few months," I confessed, tears brimming in my eyes. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I feel so confused, Mark. I love you, but I also feel alive with him in a way I haven't felt in years." Mark's silence was deafening. My heart raced as I watched him process my words. "Avery, you're telling me you've been unfaithful?" "Yes," I replied, my voice breaking. "And it hurts me to say it because I care about you so much. I didn't want to hurt you." "Why didn't you come to me before this got out of hand?" he asked, a mix of hurt and anger flashing in his eyes. "I thought I could handle it," I said, my chest tightening. "But I can't keep living this lie. I owe you honesty." He shook his head, his voice low. "Do you still love me?" "I do," I said, tears streaming down my face. "But I'm also drawn to Julian in a way that scares me. I don't know what to do, Mark. I'm torn between my love for you and this new part of me that I've discovered." Mark took a deep breath, his expression softening slightly. "I can't compete with someone else, Avery. If you feel this strongly about him, maybe you need to explore it." I felt a pang in my chest at his words. "But what about us? What we built together?" "It feels like you've already started tearing it down," he replied, sadness in his voice. "I need to know if you want to fight for us or if you want to let go." I looked down, my heart heavy. It was a choice I never wanted to make, yet here I was, faced with the reality of my decisions. "I don't know," I whispered. "I want to understand what I truly want first." As the silence enveloped us, I realized that this moment was not just about choosing between Mark and Julian. It was about understanding who I was, beyond my relationships. I needed to find that part of me that felt lost, my true desires and my identity. "I need time," I finally said, my voice steadier. "I need to figure out what makes me happy." Mark nodded slowly, his eyes filled with pain, but also with understanding. "Take all the time you need, Avery. Just be honest with yourself, and with me." With that, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. This was just the beginning of my journey, and while it was painful, it was also freeing. I was ready to embrace my own desires and discover who I was beyond these relationships. Share this story if you believe that understanding oneself is the first step towards true love. Leave a comment about a time when you had to make a difficult choice in your relationships. And subscribe for more captivating stories like this one.